Hello there, welcome to another FireRiffs baking video. This is my second baking video that I've done on this channel. I enjoyed doing the first one. Didn't get a ton of views, but you know what? It's okay. Because I like baking, and I think the more I do, the more it will catch on. So today, I'm going to be making something I have not made before. I'm making an Oreo cheesecake. Now, I've made two other kinds of cheesecakes before on numerous occasions. I've made a classic New York style cheesecake, and I made a cinnamon roll cheesecake, which I should probably do a video of sometime too. It's really, really good. One of my favorites. And I've always wanted to try an Oreo cheesecake. So I looked around for recipes that I thought looked appealing, and I found this one here. And it looks really good. So it's got, of course, an Oreo crust. You can't have an Oreo cheesecake without an Oreo crust. That's insanity. And of course, your cream cheese. Oreos on the inside. Both Oreo crumbs and cut up Oreos. And a white chocolate ganache, however it's pronounced, and whipped cream on the top with a couple Oreos, of course, on top, because you can never have too many Oreos. This is going to use a lot of Oreos. So there's 35 Oreos in the crust alone, and then there's another, let's see, yeah, another 11 to 12 Oreos just in crumbs, and 20 Oreos cut into quarters in the middle, and then you put some Oreos on the top. So you can use a lot of Oreos. So I would recommend, unless you get a good sale on the regular size pack, getting the family packs. Now you can apparently buy Oreo crumbs, which would be very handy for the crust in the store, but they're expensive. I couldn't find them in my store, but everywhere I looked online, they were like $12.49 US for a 1 pound bag, and that's now. And of course, the way inflation's going, it's going to be more. So that seemed a little pricey to me for Oreos something that I can make myself. So for the crust, you're going to need 35 Oreos crushed into crumbs. If you have a food processor, that's going to make this real easy for you. If you don't, like me, because I don't have that much use for a food processor outside the occasional crumbing of Oreos. Put them in a big Ziploc bag, about a gallon bag will do, and you take a rolling pin, or if you're feeling brave, you can take your own fist and just pound the living crap out of these Oreos until you get some nice Oreo crumbs. The only thing is, especially with using your fist, is that you're going to bust a few holes in the bag and you're going to get a crummy mess. So again, if you have a food processor, absolutely the way to go. You're going to need, like I said, you're going to need like 2 packages of the family size to have enough Oreos for this cheesecake. You will have some left over, but you're going to need the 2 just to get to enough. Okay, so I am going to go crush the living crap out of these. So I'm just going to do this off camera and come back with them. Okay, so once you get your Oreos crushed, you're going to put them in a bowl, obviously, and I'm going to mix up our crust. So there's 35 crushed Oreos. I ended up going the rolling pin route because I didn't want to bust holes in the bag and make a mess, even though that's what I do with dirt cake. So I'm going to have to make more crumbs, so I want to be able to reuse the bag. And it's going to stick a little on the inside because, Oreo cream. It's okay. And I'm going to blend those. Oh man, I wish this was a little finer. With 5 tablespoons of melted butter. I'm sure it'll be okay with that. Still bothers me. Okay, we're going to take our 5 tablespoons of melted butter. We're going to pour it in there. I've never made this recipe before, so I'm kind of like, I'm looking at this and going, is 5 tablespoons really enough butter for all these Oreos? Because it's supposed to be about 3 cups worth of Oreos, supposedly. So butter needs to moisten it, so it sticks down as a crust. So most cheesecakes that I make, like with the graham cracker crust, the crust is just on the bottom. This one is on the bottom and the sides. So that's something I'm not used to with a cheesecake. I'm a little concerned that when I pull the sides of the springform pan away, it's going to pull the side crust away. I mean, I would hope the person who put this recipe up knows what they're talking about, and this will work just fine. Still don't like it. Okay. Almost lost the fork to the floor. Okay. So you're going to get your springform pan, And you want to prepare it. You want to grease the sides, and you're going to put some parchment paper on the bottom. Now, I found some round parchment paper, so that was nice. It's very convenient. But if you can't find it, you just use your standard roll of parchment paper. It'll be fine. But if you can find the round stuff, it's nice because it just fits, fits well in a round pan. Usually I'm using parchment paper on a cookie sheet, so I'm fine. Take this, put it in there. Now, for crust, like when you're baking, you usually use unsalted butter. For crust, it's not as important that it be unsalted. So I just use some salted butter because it's a lot easier. Oh, I guess that butter's going to be enough. I just used regular butter so that I can use the rest of the stick on something else. Because I hate having like a few tablespoons of unsalted butter just sitting around that I have no use for. So you're gonna, just like any crumb crust, you're gonna press it in nice and firm on the inside of the pan. Like I said, on this one, it's gonna be the bottom and the sides, which again, not what I'm used to with a cheesecake. Very much different for me. And it looks like these crumbs are actually sufficiently crummy. I was concerned, but it's working out just fine. I'll show it to you once I have it all in there nicely. Okay. So, there it is. I'm gonna get a little closer. There's our crust. I'm gonna get a couple pieces. They don't wanna escape, but I think get a little more press there. Yeah. So it's not perfect even around the sides because I'm not that talented. I can bake. My presentation isn't always as pretty as maybe it should be. Okay, so once you've got that pressed in there, you're going to put it in your preheated oven for 8 to 10 minutes. My oven tends to run on the longer side, so I'm going to do it 10 minutes. And then you're going to move on and do your filling. You can start that while that's in the oven. So 325 Fahrenheit, it's 163 degrees Celsius for you people outside of the United States, which is most of the planet, where you use the metric system like good little doobies. Okay, so now that our crust is in the oven, we are going to work on our filling. Now, for our filling, we need some Oreo crumbs. So it says 11 to 12 Oreo crumbs. I, being a sweet lover, went with the 12 side of it. And you're going to need some 20 Oreos cut into quarters. Now, I made the mistake of taking that cutting literally and actually trying to cut it into quarters. It's a little messy. I just took the rest of mine, broke them in half and in half again by hand. And that was a lot simpler and less messy. So I get those set aside. And then we're going to need 24 ounces or 3 8-ounce bars of cream cheese. Get the good stuff. I made the mistake of trying to make something with the store brand cream cheese once. And nothing against store brands. I work in a grocery store. I use a lot of store brand stuff. Just something about the store brand cream cheese just doesn't work for baking. It's perfectly good for bagels. In fact, I've had it on bagels. It's fine. But it's just missing something for cooking. I made a dirt cake with it once, and it was just the flavor was flat. So I just stick with the brand. Philly, I don't know. There's other brand names out there like Land O'Lakes. I think Land O'Lakes makes their store brand though. So if it's the same recipe, or if you're in New England, Cabot, there are other brand names, but I know the Philly. I'm not paid or endorsed by Kraft in any way. It's just it's the go-to brand of cream cheese. Let's just be realistic. Okay, you're gonna need 4 eggs at room temperature, and I'll explain why in a little while. Some vanilla. Obviously, sugar, because there's not enough sugar in the Oreos, of course. And you're going to need some sour cream. It calls for a cup. I don't use a lot of sour cream. So I got the 8-ounce sour cream. And I know it's 8 ounces weight, not volume, but I've made enough cheesecakes to know that this is perfectly fine. My New York cheesecake calls for a cup. I always use the 8-ounce tub so I don't have a bunch of sour cream going to waste. It always comes out great. It'll be perfectly good. And if you use metric, because you're outside the US and you're watching this, you know what? I'm going to have a link to the recipe below the video. So you can link to it, and it's got everything in metric and imperial measurements both. So you'll be able to follow. But for sake of brevity, not having to keep checking every time I name something, I'm just going to stick to the imperial units I'm used to. Okay, so reason why we're using room temperature eggs. If you've made a cheesecake before, you probably know this, but one of the challenges of making a cheesecake is making it so it doesn't crack. Now, cheesecake will taste perfectly fine cracked. It doesn't look nice. You want it to have a nice smooth top. And there's a few things that can cause a cracked cheesecake. One is overmixing. You don't want to overmix in baking in general, but like overmixing can lead to a cracked crust. I've also heard that, you know, in a cheesecake you should use room temperature ingredients, that can affect it. And the third thing is letting it cool too quickly. And I will be addressing that later in the video, how to avoid cooling too quickly and hopefully avoiding cracks. It works like 99% of the time I've done. I did it like once and it didn't work, but it usually works. It's called a water bath, and again, I will be explaining that when we get to that stage of the recipe. So, start, make sure we do this right. Every recipe is a little different. We're gonna mix the cream cheese, sugar, and flour. Oh yeah, we need a little flour. Not a lot, but just a little bit. We're gonna need 3 tablespoons, I believe. Back to the ingredients list. Yeah, 3 tablespoons. Okay, so we're gonna mix. We get cream cheese. And cream cheese you want at room temperature, and that is not just to avoid cracking because it's gonna blend a lot more easily if it's softened. But this cheesecake uses less cream cheese than any other cheesecake I've made. The New York cheesecake I make uses 5 sticks in the cheesecake. The cinnamon roll one uses 4 bars in the filling, and then part of another bar in the cream cheese frosting you put on top of it. So I have to get 5 bars for that. So before I made this, I had some cream cheese in the house for a cheesecake anyways, thinking when I get the time, I'm going to make myself a cheesecake. And I got 5 bars. Turns out I only need 3 for this one. So I guess I'm going to have some bagels later in the week, which is fine by me. Or maybe make some dirt cake later in the week, or maybe not later in the week, because I'll still be finishing this off, but in the near future. Let's get our 3 bars cream cheese. Put it in our mixer. I should probably get the stand mixer more on a shot so you can see this. But I only have 1 camera to use, so I'm a little limited in my camera positions. I'm really looking forward to this. I've had this recipe sitting on the back burner, pardon the pun, for a while now. Haven't had an opportunity to make it. I finally have it, so I'm like, yeah, this better be as good as it sounds and looks. Anyone can make a picture of a cheesecake look good. Probably not anyone, but anyone, any good photographer, food photographer can. That, we need, let's see, cream cheese, sugar, we need 1 cup? 1 cup of sugar, regular old granulated sugar. So let's get our cup of sugar. Cheesecake is so flipping rich. I love it. It's like probably the most unhealthy dessert in the world, and it's also one of the most delicious. Cup of sugar. Cream cheese, sugar, and flour. So what's my flour? What did I see? 3 tablespoons? 3 tablespoons of flour. The flour ensures that it sets nice and stiff. Like you need the flour to make it set properly. It's basically the gluten. I don't know what your option is for a gluten-free cheesecake. Obviously, it's an Oreo cheesecake, so well you can get gluten-free Oreos now. So I guess the Oreos don't necessarily make it not gluten-free, but I guess you could maybe use, I don't know if you can use almond flour. I don't know. I've never made anything gluten-free, but I know, you know, if you have celiacs, you know, you miss out on a lot of good stuff because of it. So if you can find ways to make it tasty and gluten-free, that's awesome. You should definitely go for it. Okay. So, cream these, and again, very important not to overmix. So we're gonna cream. Be sure to use low speed to reduce the amount of air to the batter. Yeah, if you have a lot of air in the batter, that's another way it's gonna crack. That's partially caused by overmixing. Now, with a normal cheesecake, where it's just the filling, like a New York cheesecake, to get the bubbles out, you just pick the pan up a couple inches off the table, let it drop, do it a couple of times, and it'll just force the air bubbles out. You can't really do that with this, because if you do that, you're gonna make the Oreo pieces inside float to the top, which isn't really the look you're going for. So you have to be careful to keep air out of it wherever you can. Now this is gonna be tough, because usually you blend cream cheese on like a middle setting, so it's gonna take a little longer. But thank goodness for stand mixers, right? Makes this a lot easier. Can you imagine doing this by hand? Now, I'm sure in the past it has been done by hand, and it can be done, but it's going to be a lot of work. Now, honestly, this is awful thick to have to worry about air bubbles at this point. And it's really going to be later when you start putting some of your wetter ingredients in that air bubbles are likely to form. Okay, last little crummy bits. Okay. Spatula here and just scrape down our sides. That Oreo, that crust, by the way, it smells so good. It's just like this yummy chocolatey smell in the air. I pity you that you can't smell it where you are. Okay, now we're gonna add our sour cream and vanilla extract. Get our nice little tub of sour cream here. And despite what advertisements try to tell you, sour cream, it's all the same. Just get the one that's on sale. Don't waste your money. It all tastes the same. I know a lot of people are loyal to brands, but one of those things where it's a single ingredient, it's pretty hard for one to be any different than another. It's literally one ingredient, sour cream. I mean, how are you gonna screw that up, right? Let's see, vanilla extract. We use 1.5 tablespoons of vanilla extract. Hey, tablespoons? Really? Make sure I'm reading that right. Vanilla's expensive. 1.5 tablespoons. So a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. In case you don't have half tablespoons, I don't have any half tablespoons here. So that would mean it's gonna be a tablespoon plus a teaspoon and a half. 1 and whole teaspoon and half a teaspoon. So it's good to know your weights and measures when you do stuff like this. When you get something a little funky like that. Cream, sour cream, vanilla. Okay, I'm gonna mix that. I'm gonna put it on 2. Okay, blend that until well blended. Again, you don't want to overmix, you just want to get it mixed. One of those recipes where you blend until it's just mixed through. Once everything is fully mixed, you're like, okay, we're done with that. So I can still see a little vanilla, a little stray vanilla. I can see some cream cheese that clearly hasn't mixed with the sour cream. So I'm just going to scrape down my sides and let it run a little bit longer at a low speed. Now the good thing about a low speed is that you avoid over mixing. You can keep an eye on it and you can see them just when it gets mixed well and just shut the thing down. Another Oreo thing, I love Oreos. Another Oreo thing I make is an Oreo cake. Also really, really good. Uses quite a few Oreos. And it's a 2-layer cake, has a really good frosting. The funny thing is, it's just a little too high to fit in my cake carrier. Like if I put it in the cake carrier, I can't close the lid. So whenever I take it someplace, I just basically have to like make a foil dome over it so I can transport it. It's kind of nuts. Okay, get a little bit longer. Make sure that gets well mixed. Okay, that should do it. And now we're going to add eggs one at a time. That's very important. One at a time. Again, avoid over mixing. Make sure it gets well blended. I'm going to be naughty. I'm going to crack the egg in the bowl because I'm just brave like that. What I'm not good at is separating the egg whites. Made a banana cream pie last week and it calls for just the yolk. So I have to separate the eggs. And I'm thinking, now if a little white gets in the custard, it's not the end of the world. But if you want to do something like make a meringue later on with the whites, you can't have any yolk. And I was thinking, what am I going to do with the whites? Because the pie doesn't call for any whites. Calls for just the yolk. I thought, oh, I'll make some meringue cookies. Those are, that's a good use of them. They're tasty, they're simple. Well, I got yolk in the white. That screwed me up. So I never got to make meringue cookies. I just added an extra egg and made a big omelet for dinner one day to use it. Oh! Poop on a cracker. You didn't see that. You didn't see that. And you put all 4 eggs in like a dummy. Well, I don't think it's the end of the world, but it's not really. It's not ideal. It's not what we wanted to do. I don't think it's going to destroy the cheesecake, but oh, I'm an idiot. Okay, I think that's well mixed. And what's that on the edge? Way up the top. Way up the top. Just a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to stir in the Oreo crumbs that we made. I'm going to do it by hand just to keep it nice and gentle and avoid over mixing. I feel like it's already gone through about as much mixing as a regular cheesecake usually goes through, and I don't want to push my luck with over mixing by using the power mixer to blend these in. Plus, this is pretty easy to blend. So many crumbs stick to the side of the bag. Again, if you can do this with a food processor, you'll feel like you're wasting a lot less. I'm sure it's not as bad as I feel like it is, but it's just, I hate seeing it in there. This kitchen's getting very warm with that oven going. The only reason I have it going is because I had it going for the crust and I didn't want to turn it off and wait for it to heat back up. And I usually try to save energy by only heating it up when I'm just about ready to go. Put stuff in. Okay, so we're gonna gently stir these Oreo crumbs in. Again, if you get a food processor, you'll get finer Oreo crumbs than I have here. But this will absolutely be fine. But if you get it finer, you might be able to spread them a little further around. But no, yeah, they're looking good. I take that back. I think this looks just as good as it would look in a food processor. We used a food processor to make the crumbs. They're actually pretty fine. Besides, they're gonna be all soft inside this anyways. Okay. That's looking pretty good. Okay. So the tricky part we're coming up on is we're gonna layer this in our crust with our Oreo quarter-ish. I mean, they're not perfect. It doesn't matter. You want chunks as opposed to crumbs, and you're gonna do it in. So you do it in layers. You're gonna do a layer of filling, a layer of Oreo, another layer of filling, another layer of Oreo, and then another layer of filling. This is very similar to the way my cinnamon roll cheesecake works, in that you make a cinnamon streusel and you layer it just like you do with the Oreos, you know, filling, streusel, filling, streusel, filling. Little tricky trying to measure it out exactly. It's okay, but it's not perfect, but you want to have enough between it so your Oreos don't rise to the top. That's not really an issue with the streusel because it's so much finer, but these are bigger pieces. And this seems to be it seems to be a little bit of a thinner filling too, because I know that the cinnamon roll cheesecake filling does not use a sour cream, and it uses another bar of cream cheese. The New York cheesecake does use sour cream, but it also uses 5 bars of cream cheese. So this is interesting, and I think maybe it's got something to do with the fact that you're putting the Oreos and stuff in it, that it, you know, that's going to add to the richness. I'm not sure, but it looks really good, and I'm going to try it. And if it's good, then I'm going to make it again sometime, because I love Oreos and I love cheesecake, and they go so well together. Okay, so let's try layering this. Okay, we're being clever with the camera here. I'm using a smartphone on a tripod, so I'm doing the best I can to get this angle so you can see what I'm doing here. So we're gonna pour some cheesecake filling in. Supposed to pour a third in. It's tricky, so I'm just gonna pour a little in, spread it around the bottom, and then put some chunks in. I'm really afraid that when I take the sides off this springform pan, I'm going to lose all the side crust. That's a big concern of mine with this recipe. Like, maybe the people who did it made it work, and I'm sure that's the whole point of greasing the sides, but oh, it makes me nervous. It really does. Okay, I'm going to pour another layer in. Okay, I think we're gonna have enough of everything. I don't think there's a big danger of these Oreos floating to the top. The recipe, oh, you know, be careful, you know, that you don't want it floating to the top. I don't really see. It seems a little too viscous for anything to float to the top, but I could be wrong. Oh, what am I doing? I wanted half. Okay, well, we'll just have a lot of Oreos in this layer. Ha ha! I'm an idiot. Yeah, there's 3 layers of filling, but there's 2 layers of Oreo chunks, you dummy. It's okay. It's okay. We'll be fine. It could be a little better, but it's gonna work out just fine. We'll be okay. It's just gonna be a little chunkier at one layer than another. Oh my gosh. Yeah, see, this is why I write and don't. This is why I'm a writer. Because my brain is stupid at math. Oh my goodness. I'm so dumb. Oh boy. My stupid brain. I apologize. It's really not a big deal. It's appearance more than anything. As far as, you know, the layering. like getting it perfect layered. I mean, I'd love it to look great when you cut it open, like perfect when you cut it open, but that's clearly not in the cards for me today. But again, my first time making it. First time I did my cinnamon roll cheesecake, I didn't quite figure my layers right, so I had like a layer of streusel poking through the top. Just one of those things you gotta get with practice. Getting used to eyeballing how much is a third of your batter, learning how to do basic math, you know, stuff like that. So if it pokes through, it's going to be mostly an appearance thing. Like the crust will probably crack a little more than I'd like. Maybe not. I mean, I still got to scrape the sides of this down, so I might have plenty in here. So yeah, disclaimer: I am not a professional bakery. I'm not a professional pastry chef. So, well, I have a good idea what I'm doing. I'm going to make some silly mistakes. A lot of them pertaining to presentation, like I did here, where I couldn't count out 24 Oreo chunks for the middle like a sane person, because that's how many quarters would be half of the quarters. It's still going to be yum. It's still going to be a yummy, yummy cheesecake. You just know it's going to be good. So, not a huge loss. Now I'm seeing with the Oreo chunks, there's a reason why this uses so much less cream cheese. Because the Oreo chunks are going to take up a good amount of space in your pan. You know, we get a crack, we're going to be putting the ganache and whipped cream and Oreo pieces on top of it. So it's not going to be noticeable. The filling looks a lot like the Oreo cookie, Oreo cake frosting, because it's got the crumbs blended in. That's like a vanilla frosting with Oreo crumbs in it. Okay, so remember I mentioned to prevent cracking, you want to do something called a water bath. We're going to do that now. We're going to make our water bath. So you're going to need some aluminum foil. I recommend some heavy duty foil. A good sized pan, a good big roasting pan, I find does the job. It needs to be big enough to fit the springform pan in it. And you're going to need some boiling water. So, what we want to do is we want to wrap our springform pan in some foil so that no water leaks in from the water bath. Because obviously we're going to be sticking this pan in water, in case you haven't figured that out yet. So the heavy duty, just to give it that little extra, whatever, extra strength to avoid tearing and getting stuff in. If you want to use 2 layers going 2 directions, that isn't necessarily a bad idea. Alright, I'll show you what this looks like when I get it wrapped. It's a little tricky. It's okay if it comes a little over the top. Better a little extra than not enough. Okay, so that's going to keep anything coming in, hopefully, around the bottom of the pan, where the sides connect. Now we're going to boil ourselves a lot of water, because we're going to fill it about halfway up, or 3/4 of the way up, with boiling water, like up to the sides of the pan. So you're going to need a good amount of water to make that work. So I got a good full kettle there, and that's going to boil up, and I'll pour that into our roasting pan with the cheesecake in it. And once you do that, you got to put it in the oven, and you got to be very, very careful that you don't spill any boiling hot water on yourself while you're moving it. But it's an important step. I'm going to put that in our 300-degree oven for, I believe, an hour and 20 minutes. So So they'll all say this, all your cheesecake recipes, the center should be set but still jiggly. So yeah, it's not going to be solid. It's going to jiggle. That's okay. That's normal. You're going to put it in there for about, for the hour and 20 minutes. Now what the water bath does is it provides moisture and keeps the pan from heating up too quickly. And it's going to keep moisture in there. It's going to help keep the cheesecake from cracking. And then, when the 1 hour and 20 minutes is up, we're going to turn off the oven. We're going to let it sit in there for about a half hour with the door closed. The oven's going to cool down. The cheesecake's going to cook a little bit more. And then after that, we're going to open the oven just a crack. And we're going to let it cool for another 30 minutes or so. I want to say, let's see what their recommendation is, because this is a different cheesecake, and I want to make sure that I get it right. Yep. Okay, yeah. Another 30 minutes to continue cooling slowly. Again, this prevents cracking. And then you're going to take it out, water bath. You're going to take it out of the water bath. You're going to take the wrapper off. You're going to stick it in your refrigerator. It's going to need about 6 hours, so pretty much you're going to do it overnight. Okay, now we're going to pour our water into our water bath, and I'm extremely self-conscious because I'm not alone in the house. And I melt the tablecloth because I forgot to put something under this. Too late for that, though. So you want to get it about halfway up. Okay, pretty much a full kettle of water here. Now we're going to put this in the oven. Melt it up. Tablecloth and all. It's going to be very, very gentle carrying this because it has boiling water in it. You don't want to have to sue yourself for being burnt by boiling water that you're surprised is hot. See, now it's better that landed on the oven door than on me. Set our timer for an hour and 20 minutes, 80 minutes. And we will let that go and we'll bring it out in an hour and 20 minutes. We will remove that. Actually, no, we will not remove it. We're going to cool it slowly. Okay, so now we've taken the cheesecake out of the oven. And as you can see, we avoided cracks by using the springform pan. So an important thing to note is that I did let it gradually cool. So it sat in the oven for a half hour with the door closed after I turned it off. And then another half hour with the door slightly ajar. And then after that, you take it out and remove from the foil. I'm going to put it in the fridge. We're going to leave the board, the sides of the pan attached until it's fully set. Okay, so for our ganache, we're going to need 7 ounces of white chocolate chips. I had to kind of guesstimate. I had a 12-ounce bag and no kitchen scales, so a little over half the bag. And 4 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream. That's about 2 ounces. A tablespoon's half an ounce, so 4 tablespoons or 2 ounces of heavy whipping cream, or heavy cream. It's the same thing. Some cartons say heavy, some say heavy whipping. And we're going to heat it to just till it just starts to boil. We're going to use that to melt the white chocolate chips. So I got it in a small saucepan, and I'm going to put it on a small burner. And I'm going to do it at a low temperature because you don't want to scald the milk or the cream. You just want to get it to start boiling. Just start boiling, and then we're going to pour it onto the white chocolate chips. So I'm going to stir it. It doesn't say in the recipe to stir it all the time, but you want to stir it, or it's gonna stick to the bottom of the pan. So I get it on a small burner on the back. I put it on a low heat, and it's not going to take very long. But I'm going to keep stirring it because I do not want this all sticking to the bottom of the pan. Okay, that should do it. Now, double check instructions. Pour over the white chocolate chips. Here's the thing, it's a tiny amount of cream. I'm trying to get all of it out because it's not a heck of a lot of cream. It says to let it sit for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm gonna let it sit for 2. Let it sit for 2 to 3 minutes, and then we're supposed to whisk that together, and the chips ideally should be melting in. Okay, so the ganache is absolutely ridiculous to try to make. The recipe's instructions are terrible. It tells you to whisk. You can't possibly whisk it. It's altogether too thick to whisk. Stir it. Whatever the recipe says about whisking, ignore it. Just stir it. And it is a pain in the butt to melt. It took me at least a half hour to get it melt, constantly trying to heat a little bit, stir it, heat it, stir it. So yeah, the ganache is kind of a pain in the butt. And then they wanted to sit for 5 minutes, which I'm pretty sure if I let it sit for 5 minutes, it's going to be a brick. But the rest of their instructions have been so great for the ganache that I'm sure they're not wrong about this. Sarcasm. Until thickened but still pourable. It says until thickened but still pourable. It's never been pourable. Does this look pourable to you? Does that look pourable? No, it's not pourable. The chips aren't even fully melted and I just gave up. So yeah, the ganache recipe is a pain in the butt. But the only thing about this recipe that is horrible, I mean the rest of it, it's probably gonna taste good, but that's just nonsense. That's absolute foolishness. In fact, I'm gonna put it on now. I have 5 minutes. I'll be lucky if this spreads, let alone if it spreads now, let alone in 5 minutes. Well, you can see the chips are still chunky. It's atrocious. It just, I'm sure, like, try to find a ganache recipe that's better than this. Clearly, the person who made this recipe, I don't know what they were thinking, but it's, as it is, it's atrocious. Like I said, it probably tastes fine. I mean, fine as white chocolate tastes. I'm not a big white chocolate person. By the way, white chocolate isn't chocolate at all. But it'll work. I think it does work for this because it's like kind of like the cream in the Oreo, but on top of the cake. And I think, like I said, I think it'll be good in this. So there's the ganache in a heap on there. I'm gonna spread it on. So that's the ganache. I'm gonna spread that on. It's lumpy. It's crap. It is so lumpy and bad. It was never going to melt. I could have died trying to melt this. Okay, so there's the spread ganache. Didn't melt like I wanted it to. I could have been there till doomsday trying to get it to melt. So that's how good that's as good as it's gonna get. Didn't quite spread to the edges, but we're gonna put whipped cream around the sides, so you're not gonna notice it. So my advice is find a better recipe for ganache than what this thing gives you. At least better instructions. Okay, and finally we're gonna make whipped cream topping for this. Whipped cream's pretty easy. So we're going to use a cup of heavy cream, or 8 ounces, or however many milliliters that is in metric. And we're gonna do a teaspoon of vanilla. I think it says a half a teaspoon or 3/4 of a teaspoon, but whenever I make this amount of vanilla, amount of whipped cream, I use a teaspoon of vanilla. It's really to taste. So I'm gonna use a full teaspoon. And we're gonna need half a cup of confectionery sugar. So this little scoop I have is a 1/4 cup, so I'm gonna get 2 of these and put it in there. And to some degree, the sugar is to taste too. If a half a cup seems too sweet to you, you can use a little less. Okay. Then we're going to take our mixer, our hand mixer. You don't need a stand mixer. This is pretty simple. And if you got a whisk attachment, it's going to go a lot faster than the regular beaters. Just ramp that up to the highest speed, and we're just going to whip it until we get stiff peaks. My rule of thumb is, if you know it's done when you can hold the bowl upside down and nothing comes out. So. Okay, I think that's done. Nice and stiff. Do our little test. And that's your whipped cream. Better than anything you'll get from Ready Whip. We're gonna put that in a frosting piping bag, and we're gonna put it around the edges of our cheesecake. Okay, so you want to fill it about halfway up at a time. Otherwise, it's going to come all bursting out the top on you, and that is not what we want. I don't have the size tip they recommend for decorating, and I mean, again, it's just decoration. It's not going to make it any better or worse. About halfway, a little more. Kind of burp any gas out. Okay, so that's coming out. And then so you twist up the top, and you hold it there, and then you squeeze it from about the middle. About the middle of stuff. And we're just going to go around the ridge. Oh, I'm just going to... Now they say just do it around the edges. So we're going to do fairly big mounds here. I have a key lime pie that I pipe whipped cream onto, and they show just the edges, but the amount of cream they give you is way more than is needed for just the edges of the pie. So I end up covering the whole thing. They also do smaller blobs, so I'm going to try these slightly bigger blobs. See how it comes out. I'm going to add a little more cream to our bag. great thing about this is it kind of hides the fact that we couldn't get the ganache all the way to the edge of the cake like we wanted to. This is a lot of whipped cream for this. Honestly, I'm wondering if we could have got by with about half of this for just the edges. But again, I think the tip they use is bigger, so they probably get bigger blobs of whipped cream on than I'm getting. So that could be the whole issue I'm having with this. The key lime pie, on the other hand, those are clearly tiny little twists of stuff they have. And I thought, let's cover the whole thing. It'll be fine, and it looks good, and it tastes good, and it uses all the whipped cream without wasting any of it, so I'm going to just keep doing that. I should note, when you're making the whipped cream, well, you want to get it stiff, and you want it so that it doesn't come out of the bowl when you turn it upside down. If you go too long, you're going to start making very sweet vanilla butter, which is not your goal. I mean, really all salt is all butter is heavy cream that's been heavily mixed. Like basically, if you want to make butter at home, just keep whipping your heavy cream until it becomes hard. I guess that's the best way to put it. And if you want a little butter, then you can, like if you want it salted, you can kind of just dip it in slightly salted water. Just get the salt on the outside of it. Okay. It's a little more covered than the recipe shows, again, because I think I'm using a smaller tip. But I got pretty much the biggest tip I could find that I had. I mean, and again, it's entirely a decorative thing, so it's really not a big deal. Top it off. It says to use additional chopped Oreos or whatever, like in the center. I don't know if I'm going to go for full on like huge Oreo crumbs, like Oreo crumbs, but and I tried cutting Oreos in half. It doesn't work. I mean, I guess it does, but it's kind of like, it's pointless to take a knife and cut them when you can just split them by hand. That one didn't split right. I guess I have to eat it. That's a shame. We can just crumble it a little. I think that works. Let's take these little Oreo halves that we didn't use. I'll put that one in there. And I'll take this one. I'm just going to crumble a little. We're not going to stick it in a bag or anything. We're just going to do a little crumbling. And again, because they have just the edge, they have a bigger center to put the crumbles than I've got. There you go. There you fancy cheesecake. That is one. I'm sorry I couldn't get a better angle on it. That is one fancy looking cheesecake. Unfortunately, I just have my smartphone to record with. I need to get a better camera. And that is the finished product. Not flawless, probably doesn't look quite like a bakery, but it looks good. So we got the ganache on the underneath that whipped cream. I said, I have a smaller tip for the whipped cream than the people who made the recipe, so the whipped cream goes a little further into the center, but it's just decorative, so it doesn't really matter. Put our Oreo halves on the edge and some crumbs in the middle. So that's an Oreo cheesecake, and with the exception of the ganache being a pain in the buttocks, I think it came out pretty well. And I think I'd make it again, but I'd find a better way to make the ganache, maybe even just find a pre-made ganache. As much as I hate to do that, I like making things from scratch. That was a pain in the behind. I think if you've got some of that melting chocolate, like for dipping, like the white chocolate one, and melted that in the microwave and spread it on, I think it would probably be just as good as the ganache. Maybe not quite as good, but honestly, I think if you don't want to go through the frustration of making the ganache, I think it's a good compromise. And now we're going to stick it in the fridge, obviously, because it's a cheesecake, and when it's ready to serve, we'll take it out and serve it. So that is making a Oreo cheesecake. And sometime I'll make just a regular cheesecake or my cinnamon roll cheesecake, I hope, and do a video on that. So yeah, if you like this video, if you enjoyed it, if you like the idea of making this and you want to make it at home, hit the like, get this thing into the algorithm, subscribe. I'm going to try to do other baking videos. I do mostly video games and riffing, but I want to do more baking videos. And again, the link to the recipe is in the description. Try it out. If you try this recipe and you like it, or you don't, whatever, put in the comments. Let me know how it came out for you, how it worked for you. If you had any better luck with the ganache than I had, that especially, I would love to know. I mean, if I have any professional bakers out there who could tell me what I was doing wrong with the ganache, that I was having so much trouble, or if it was just a recipe that assumes that you know more than I know about making a ganache. So thank you, and thank you for watching.